Welcome to the Voices of Young People podcast, brought to you by Springtide Research Institute. In each episode, we hear directly from young people as they respond to our research and share about the issues impacting their lives. As sociologists and researchers, we see a new story unfolding for young people, one that moves beyond traditional institutional boundaries and requires careful attention to the inner and outer lives of emerging generations. At the intersection of being and becoming, it's the Voices of Young People.
Hello and welcome back to Season 7. I'm Marta Abawaji, the head of community engagement at Springtide, and I'm so pleased to bring you another episode in our Mental Health and Gen Z series. Today's conversation has two young people who both happen to be Springtide ambassadors. They are part of our SAP program, which you can learn more about on our website. We have Mercer coming to us from North Carolina, Grace coming from Massachusetts. They're both high school students, and they're going to share more about where they get messages about mental health and what they really hope different trusted adults will do to just normalize conversations about mental well-being, and they have a lot of great insights to share. So let's hear from Grace first.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, my name is Grace. I'm 16 years old. I'm a junior in high school. My pronouns are she, her. I go to the Cambridge Matnon School. Probably my most prevalent interest would be in mental health. I also really like to write. So psychology and journalism are things I'm really interested in. I've also recently gotten into the hobby of doing drama at my school. That's been really fun for me.
I love that. We have several SAT members who are involved in some aspect of drama. Some is on stage, some is doing behind scenes work. But the fact that you also are passionate about mental health has been really fun to learn about you, because you have done major school projects where you've dove into research and understanding and best practices really for young people's mental health. So that's going to be really fascinating to have in today's conversation. Mercer, what about you?
Yes. Hello. My name is Mercer. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 17 years old, junior in high school, and I'm from North Carolina. I really enjoy dancing, hiking, any kind of activity. Snowboarding has been one of my recent new passions, and I really enjoy listening to music and creating all kinds of playlists and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, music gets mentioned in a lot of these conversations, even as just a practice that helps guide young people's, mental health space, cultivating, getting into the right headspace, but also all the outdoor stuff you do, I know ends up being a big driver just for young people having movement and space to get things from their head expressed out into their body or their head, their heart, however you want to interpret mental health, which I guess is a good starting place to know in a few words, how do you two think of mental health? When you hear that phrase, what comes to mind?
So oftentimes I kind of parallel mental health with physical health. So all the things that you would do to maintain your physical health, you should also do to maintain your mental health. So kind of the emotional, social, psychological maintenance of good habits that support your mental health, which also requires, observation and kind of tracking all of those things so that you stay healthy in your mind, I guess.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Mercer. What would you say, Grace?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Mercer said. I also just for a long time, I guess when I was younger especially, and even just in recent years, I used to only think of the phrase mental health when you're talking about mental illness, diagnosed mental illness. And I never thought of it as something that everyone has. And just your general emotional well-being. So I guess my perspective kind of changed on that after learning more about it. But yeah, I definitely agree with Mercer. It goes hand in hand with kind of all your other aspects of your life and how much you're taking care of them.
Well said. Well said. And I think to your point, I think that's why this conversation with Gen Z is so important, because I think you all are helping destigmatize mental health in a lot of ways, where previous generations have often seen it only as mental illness, like you said, Grace, instead of seeing it as just mental well-being that every person can find different ways to maintain, as Mercer was alluding to. And so in that vein, where do you get messages about mental health?
I feel like I've learned a lot recently, or I feel like it's discussed a lot more now on social media, even just in small ways, or like, I guess like it's more common nowadays on social media for people to talk about their own mental health. And also I get messages in my school from time to time. Kind of, my school's very good at letting people know what resources they have available if they need it, like nurses and guidance counselors. And it's kind of like small doses. They'll do like advice on how to take care of your mental health and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. As far as the media aspect goes, for me, I feel like with technology now, there's a very specific algorithm that you're exposed to and that is like created. So for me, I feel like I'm only seeing a very specific, I guess, realm of things that are out there. So I feel, and I know a lot of people probably feel too, that they're only seeing the good parts of people's lives. And so I think that the media can kind of be very helpful in that a lot of people are talking about their mental health and stuff like that, but it can also be very toxic in that like you're only seeing the good parts sometimes, and rarely do you see when it's bad. As far as my school goes, it's not, at my school, it's not very talked about, like mental health. It's not like pushed away and like shut out completely, but I feel like my school has kind of like feels indifferent, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. So given what you just said, Mercer, is there someone that you feel like if you were worried about your own mental health or a friend's that you would turn to? It doesn't have to be at school, just in different realms of life. Who would that be?
Personally, I would probably go to friends, just because, you know, our generation, it is talked about a little bit more. So there is a generational disconnect. So I feel more comfortable going to my friends that are my age as opposed to like a parent or a teacher or something like that.
Yeah, I hear that. Grace, you mentioned that your school, references nurses and counselors. Is that who you would turn to? Or is there someone else beyond those?
I would say definitely like when those are my options, then I'm comfortable going to them, but not really in a way that I would open up to them. And that's honestly just because like they work at my school. I would say the person I am most comfortable turning to would probably be my parents, especially my mom, because my mom has been really open with me about her mental health, and her struggling with anxiety and things like that. And whenever I would tell her about it, she's given me like so many options and ways to help me, and she's never made me feel bad about it. So I guess that's what made me feel most comfortable going to her with things like that.
Yeah, the fact that she's modeling, here's my own journey and experience, and here's the way that I've maybe leaned into different supports, whether those are practices she does or whether that's professional support. I think our research shows that a lot, even before our mental health series, our research shows how much a trusted adult being authentic and being vulnerable to share their own experience, that yields a lot of trust with young people, where it doesn't just feel like, oh, I guess the adults have their lives together and everything's figured out and smooth. But when adults can say, hey, here's where I've maybe had a challenge, or here's something I've struggled with, and here's how I've addressed it, or here's how I'm presently addressing it, that can go a long way for young people feeling like it's a relationship where they can be real as well.
If I can add something to that as far as like school goes. So I will say that, like, although my school sometimes does feel indifferent to mental health, I did have like one teacher, and specifically, not inspecifically, I had one teacher specifically that like I very much remember and like stands out to me as like someone I can go to or count on. And that is because that teacher like made a conscious effort with all students to create a space and time for us to kind of open up and share things about our lives that wouldn't normally be talked about just in the classroom. And like we did these things called SEL check-ins every day, and it stands for social emotional learning. And this teacher, you know, we would just talk about random things that, you know, whatever we wanted to, or whatever the prompt was for the day. Like, do you cut your sandwiches diagonally or straight down? Or we would create a jam board with all of our favorite music. And I think that when, you know, administration or like leaders or people who are like in control create a conscious effort to like reach out, that the generational disconnect is, you know, broken down, and there is more trust there when there's a conscious effort. I think it's really important. And students remember that, because she was obviously like very important to me and in my life. So.
Oh, I love that social emotional learning example. And I love how it is like, sometimes it is just talking about mundane stuff in life. Like social emotional learning here doesn't mean like we're going to have a deep question every single day that like gets at how you're feeling in a really personal way. Sometimes it is, like you said, do you like your sandwich cut straight across or diagonal? And then just seeing where conversation goes. I think that's helpful, what you provided. So it doesn't always feel like, whoa, can we go on a really personal level always? Sometimes it's just building relationship through silly or lighthearted things too. Okay. So you all have really key adults in your life. Besides turning to them or to friends, like you've mentioned, what are the activities that you do yourself when you're feeling stressed or you're feeling anxious or you're feeling down or whatever the emotion is? You don't necessarily have to describe that, or the mental health state is. You can mention if you want, but I'm more concerned about those activities that you find helpful.
For me, I really like to write. That's something that I learned is a good tool for me through like therapy. Just being able to get things out of your head and kind of onto an external place in different ways, like even just talking to someone, and then you feel like it doesn't have to just be in your head anymore. But definitely journaling has started to help me, even though I don't do it as much as I probably should. I really like to journal. I also kind of, when I'm feeling down, that's kind of when I feel like I turn and like look at myself and I'm like, okay, what do I like to do? Because a lot of things I do, I'm a very extroverted person. So everything I do is like, let's do something that my friends want to do. Let me do something with my friends. Let me do something with my dad. And then when I kind of lose all my energy and I'm not feeling great, that's when I'm finally, okay, what do I like to do? So a lot of times I like to read. Like I said, I like to write. Sometimes I just like to sit outside. It makes me feel better. Or just go on walks by myself, listen to music like Mercer said, things like that.
Oh, those are all wonderful. What about you, Mercer?
I also like to, you know, figure out what I like to do. So recently, since I've gotten my license, it's been driving around. I don't know if that's just because I got my license or I really like to do it, but I like hiking. I like being outside a lot. That helps me kind of connect, I guess, in nature that way. But first I have to like distinguish, like, is this problem that I'm having like within my control, or is it without like not within my control? So if it's like within my control, I like to be isolated and alone and kind of process my feelings and emotions. And then if it's out of my control, I tend to like distract myself through like hanging out with friends. So it just depends on what problems I have that day or that week or whatever's on my mind.
Just a quick break to give a shout out. Springtide is able to offer this podcast because of donors who make our research and actionable insights possible. Mark, a youth mentor, recently wrote us to say, I highly recommend Springtide Research Institute to anyone who works with youth. Whether you're a teacher, minister, social worker, or a parent, understanding the experiences of the young people you work with is vital. Loneliness, isolation, anxiety, and stress all make it harder for a young person to learn and thrive in a healthy manner. Applying this research will be the launch pad toward effective change. You can see more of our current findings on our website, springtideresearch.org, where you can also make your own tax-deductible donation with a variety of giving options. Now, back to the episode. You already mentioned both people at your school that are really helpful, which I feel like connects so well with our connections aspect in our research, because that's one of the driving themes that is going to appear throughout this whole mental health and Gen Z series is connections. The second is expectations, and the third is purpose. You can get so much more on the data in each of our separate reports, but in our educators report specifically, I'm curious about expectations. Are there expectations in your schools that you feel like are helpful for your mental health? And then I also want to know, do you feel like there's expectations that sometimes are more harmful when it comes to your mental health? So let's hear about helpful first, expectations that cultivate a positive mental health experience.
For me at my school, I think there's an expectation particular, not necessarily an expectation, but an encouragement to learn about not just like standard curriculum, but things you're really passionate about. So that's through like a lot of teachers will do like personal projects just about yourself or something you're interested in. Recently, the way that I was able to do a project on mental health is my school does an experiential learning course. So you get to choose whatever you want to learn about and then do a project on it of your choice. So yeah, that was really cool for me. And just something I feel like my school emphasizes, and something I know that one of the teachers said to one of my friends once that I thought was very impactful was like, if it's something you care about, then you deserve to learn about it. So I think that's helpful in the way that my school not necessarily strays from standard curriculum, but gives you the chance to pursue what you're interested in if you want to take that chance.
Yeah, no, that's a really neat opportunity. I love the ways that you really built your own passions and interests into that. I didn't know that's what helps drive that project you did. That's really cool. Mercer, yeah, do you have an example of where your school uses expectations in a way that helps your mental health?
Yeah, I would say along with Grace, like our school really encourages us to get involved in different clubs, and we have like so many clubs that gear towards whatever you're interested in. And so they really encourage us to try new things and get involved. And I think that creates new relationships and new experiences, which I think is healthy because otherwise you wouldn't know about them. And then specifically in one class that I have, we're always encouraged to listen with the intent to understand, not to respond. And so I think that that's really helpful and kind of offered a new perspective for me to talk a little less and listen more.
Oh, that's great. This is a great philosophy that can apply to so much. Think of how many adults, if they were learning that skill in high school, how different conversations and their skills would be. I really love that. Okay, let's hear about things that maybe where expectations can be more harmful.
I think, Grace, do you want to go?
Oh, no, you can go first.
I don't think it's just my school. I think it's kind of across all schools and all high schoolers, but it's very strongly encouraged that there's a one-way solution, which is most oftentimes a 4-year college degree. I think that can be harmful. The one path to success or happiness is a college degree, which doesn't work for everyone. So I think that's harmful.
Totally. And the pressure or the, like, you're not being successful if that's not the path you're looking towards, or you're not held up sometimes as like the model student, the ideal student, if that's not in your trajectory. I think that's really important to highlight. Thank you, Mercer. Grace, do you have something in that realm?
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with what Mercer said about colleges, because then, like, in schools, a lot of kids aren't taught about what their options are if college doesn't feel right for them. And so I feel like that would bring up a lot of anxiety. But also, what I was thinking of is I feel like a lot of schools kind of have this expectation of, like, always do your best, but it's not do your personal best. It's kind of be the best. So, like, if you're acing your classes, like you're doing good in a certain class, then take a harder one. You should be taking a harder one. If you're doing really bad in the class, then you're not trying hard enough, and things like that. And I feel like a lot of times teachers, and this is not to discredit the teachers at my school. I love the teachers at my school. But yeah, sometimes a lot of teachers don't see the overlap in academics, in your personal life or your mental health, and how that could affect it. Like not being able to turn in assignments, or just like being really negatively affected by academic pressure, and seeing how that would affect your academic performance, but not really taking that into account. Just always thinking you can always work harder, you can always do more, and things like that. I feel like that just builds a lot of pressure that causes more anxiety, because in some ways it can be encouraging, but in other ways it's kind of like, oh my God, for a lot of people.
I hear that. I totally hear that pressure. I've worked in high schools, I worked in middle schools, and I am like flashing back to different messages where I've seen that be detrimental for students, where they feel like when they are trying their hardest, it's not honored as that. It's seen as they're slacking in some way, or they're failing in some way. And of course that is going to have ramifications on self-esteem and different mental health realities as well. So you both are so wise in bringing a lot of really poignant examples into the conversation. I mentioned that purpose is the third driving theme that will emerge throughout our mental health series. And in that regard, I'm wondering, is there something that either of you connect to that's bigger than yourself? That could be a cause or a movement, just the sense of like, there's something bigger than you, being the world or the universe or a higher power. It could be a community. If you could share one of those connections, and whether that sense of purpose has an impact on your mental health.
I think for me, definitely, I kind of saw a shift in my mental health from going to a really, really large school than a really, really small school. Because the school I go to now is kind of what I love about it is being able to, like, you're not just a number, your voice is being heard and taken into account. And I think in the past year, not as much my sophomore year, but this past year, I really enjoyed kind of finding a purpose and a passion within, like I said, mental health. The project that I did, being able to talk to different students in my school on a more personal level about their mental health, and report that and kind of work hand in hand with my school administration to try to take mental health more into account.
Wow.
It's things like that where you kind of feel like you're actually, not that you're actually doing something, but feeling like there's something you're working towards and something you want. And if you feel like you can help, that's something that's really impacted me, because a lot of times, and I know other people have thought like this, like, I'm like, oh, I'm just a kid, I can't do anything. But you can help in small ways for sure, even at just like my small high school, even just like scratching the surface of being able to slowly start more conversations about mental health has positively impacted my own mental health.
I love that you felt like your teachers or administrators would take you seriously and really listen to your project and to the perspectives that you gathered, and that you feel like, yeah, I'm having an impact here. And because that is such a passion for you, I can totally see how that driving sense of purpose would positively impact your mental health. And it just so happens that the greater purpose there is mental health. But I think even if it was a different project, just that you felt like really heard and that you were helping to drive change, I can see that yielding a lot of just like, I matter here. I matter in this community, and my voice and perspective is taken seriously. So kudos to those administrators who are listening well to young people.
Definitely.
I also definitely agree. Like, I want what I'm doing and my actions I want to see that it's helping others. And that's my kind of purpose, I guess, is whatever I'm doing, whatever higher power I'm serving, I want it to be bigger than myself, if that makes sense. So whether that be through different, like I'm an interactive club at my school, and that's a lot of community outreach and help within the community. Then there's also community outreach and missions through my church and just different things. So I get joy and happiness, and like, I feel good when I do these things. And so I want to give that to other people. I want other people to feel the same joy and love and opportunity. So by community outreach and serving something bigger than myself, I feel like my biggest purpose, I think. Like, I feel like it's served. I feel like I'm doing good.
Yeah. And that's really cool that both your school and your faith community have aspects that lead to that. Some people, don't even have necessarily one space where they feel like they're able to offer that. So the fact that you have multiple, communities where you feel like, I get to give back, I get to support others, I get to feel like I'm looking out not just for myself, but for what other needs are in my school, in my town, in my church, and all of those places surrounding. So I really am encouraged to hear that. Do either of you feel like there's something very particular about how Gen Z thinks about mental health that is different? I know you both mentioned that you feel like you get messages in different ways than other generations, but is there even something about the ways that you all process the mental health conversation that sets you apart?
Obviously, the more we talk about something and the more conversation there is around something, a topic, this one being mental health, the more comfortable the community becomes with it and talking about it. And so I think talking about it lets everyone know, like, oh my gosh, this person's having the same problem that I am. This person's having the same struggles in their life. And I think when you're scared to talk about it, it is pushed down in a way. And so I think historically, yes, there has been a lack of conversation around mental health, but I think that the more you talk about it, the more we all realize that we're all experiencing the same issues, just on a different level and a different spectrum in reality, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said because I was going to say something similar. Like, I feel like our generation definitely talks about it more and is more comfortable talking about it. So I was going to say, in my own life, like with people my age and specifically my group of friends, I think for me, if I didn't have friends who were so openly talking about like their mental health and what they would need to do, I would have never felt comfortable reaching out for the options that I've needed, like medication or therapy. Because when I first started going to therapy, I thought I was like crazy because I didn't know anyone else who did. And then having people my age who would say they did the same things or they needed the same things, and like, good for you. I think it does help to destigmatize and mental health. I mean, obviously, there's still a long way to go, but also just being able to feel like, kind of like what Mercer said, I'm not the only one who struggles with this. It's very helpful for anyone.
Getting things just out in the open, normalizing it through conversations. I mean, that is the goal a lot of this whole podcast season. So you both are helping drive that even further with anyone who's listening, that two young people who live in different parts of the country and who don't even necessarily know each other that well yet, since our ambassadors program is just kind of getting off the ground for this year. When we recorded this episode, we're still willing to talk about this subject with some helpful authenticity, knowing that your experiences aren't isolated, and the ways that you all encounter this is similar to not only to one another, but to so many other 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds like yourselves across the country. If you were doing this interview and we flipped it around and you were offering the questions, is there something else that you would want to bring into the conversation that hasn't been mentioned today? Another question or topic?
So I'm really curious about, like, if there's a generational disconnect now, and there's things that my generation is struggling with and is just now beginning to, touch the surface on issues like mental health. I'm curious as to what problems and issues are going to like cycle for my children, if that makes sense. It sounds weird, not children, but the next generation. So
yeah,
I do struggle reaching out to older people, like maybe my parents, or, I mean, I have before, but it's not my first instinct, I guess. But I love my parents, nothing like that, but it's different. So
yeah,
the question I would ask is, like, what do you want to do to make sure that doesn't happen for the next generation, or kind of make the next generation feel more comfortable about the conversation around mental health? Because I think everyone wants their emotions and feelings validated, to, like, say, hey, it's okay to feel this way. Everyone wants that, like, human relationship. And I think that talking about it is super helpful. So, just what would you do to break the cycle, I guess?
Yeah, I think that question is why we do so much of our research, and why this is our commitment in 2022 and extending into 2023, that we want to make sure that there are trusted adults who are doing their work, not only for their own mental well-being, but also their work to support Gen Z. So while you said it's not always your first instinct to turn to adults, that's not an isolated experience. And so what can trusted adults do to show that they have your back? Not just you specifically, Mercer, but young people across the board as well. So yeah, your question drives at our why of this whole series for sure.
The reason that I think it has been such a daunting topic for so long is because we don't focus on, like, a maintenance of it. It's just, we only talk about it when it's bad, when it gets rough. And I think that celebrating the good more often and focusing on keeping a steady watch on our mental health makes it less scary and easier, rather than just, let's talk about it when it's bad. Let's talk about it when things are, rough. I think that focusing on it like a maintenance, like we would our bodies, our physical health, is just as important. So I think that's what makes it less scary.
Yeah. Can I add something onto that? Because I completely agree. I love talking about stuff like that. I feel like specifically through about like schools, like Mercer said, like things aren't really discussed regarding mental health until they're really bad or until you're like completely burnt out. You can't function anymore. And I think that's part of why, like, I think that needs to change majorly in like institutions, especially schools with young people, is putting in measures to support students on like a preventative level rather than just responsive. So having aspects like counselors and places to sit and like, I don't know, just like little things to help students before they have to reach the point of a crisis, to prevent those things, is really important.
Oh man, y'all set up our research so well with that input, because that is ultimately the goal of what our research through the mental health series is trying to accomplish, is how can organizations and institutions be more proactive instead of only having mental health be this crisis response that comes when it's a dire situation. We still want crisis response in there. We're not saying to eliminate that, but we're saying, how can you shift cultures in your organization so that you're creating a more mental health friendly space from the get-go? So you all said that so well, that really tees up our whole goal for this Mental Health in Gen Z series. So thank you for that added perspective.
I feel like, kind of like we've touched on, the best thing that like adults can do and can continue to do to make young people feel more comfortable talking about mental health and opening up about it is just opening up themselves, and not necessarily having to be vulnerable, but like, I guess, delving into your own life and being personal on that level kind of begins to, I guess, take away the feeling of a power imbalance between two people, like between like school teachers and students. When teachers begin to talk about their own lives and even just like things that don't matter, like small things, like what Mercer was saying with like her group that was talking about like how you cut your sandwiches and things like that. Just being able to get personal and show that you care about students or young people as people and respecting that is kind of, I feel like, what begins to make them feel comfortable enough to open up and have the conversations that they need to have.
Totally. I mean, what you both said points so much to Springtide's research. It makes me think of our 2020 report about relational authority. And that's really what you two are describing, we have 5 different components. People can dig into that research if they want. You can even get that report free, the digital version on our website. But those components of relational authority is how you build trust and connection. And you two you're describing that in your own words in such simple, but actually profound ways. So I'm really grateful for that. I think that sets up our listeners well to think about what type of environments they're creating and nurturing for the young people that they serve, and really making mental health a priority in all of those spaces, making those environments more mental health friendly. So thank you for everything you both offered today. It's been so fun to listen to you both and connect in this way. And I know our audience is going to get a lot.
Visit springtideresearch.org to hear more voices of young people and to learn about the latest research and resources available in our Mental Health and Gen Z series. Springtide Research Institute is supported by donors who believe in the critical research and insight-generating work we do on behalf of young people. Make your own tax-deductible donation with a variety of giving options on our website today. Be sure to follow us on social media at We Are Springtide and interact with the resources in the Springtide series on mental health by using the hashtag #MentalHealthAndGenZ. Today's show was produced by Marta Abawaji. The audio was mixed by Andy Palmer, with original music created by high school student Christian Unthink. Special thanks to the 16 guests featured in Season 7 and to all the young people whose perspectives and insights make our research possible. Thank you for listening.